Vampires are traditionally the antagonist of any horror film, but the Twilight series broke that tradition by making it big in the romantic genre. However, let me discuss the traditional today, and in that sense, every fan of horror films know exactly the role of a vampire and the stereotypes that appear in their narratives. And there's a range of these vampires, from the suave Dracula to the sexy Rob Pattinson to the ugly and mean to the hopeless mutants. These species of bloodsuckers have played it all and in different forms. While the vampires are featured alongside Blade, Marvel Comics superhero, the other famous characters are well known in the storyline. However, Blade's second film, directed by Guillermo del Toro, introduced a special kind of vampire who isn't the classic monstrous human, but rather different, known as a Reaper. These Reapers are a new and more dangerous kind of species that has a savage appetite and animalistic tendencies. If danger had a metric to calculate the highest form of danger, then the Reapers would get a score of 10 out of 10, since they were a threat from all angles, right from their appearances to their form of feeding, which bore very little resemblance to their original selves, i.e. the vampires. Blade surely was staring at the danger of a lifetime. Here's a detailed look at this new species. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Who are the Reapers? What is their backstory? The Reapers are a far more horrific version of vampires, playing the lead antagonist in Blade 2. They are termed a new breed of vampires, but we call them a hybrid of vampire and human who are stronger and deadlier than their forebears, the vampires. How were these deadly species created? The DNA of the vampire species, under intense research, resulted in a beastly virus strain called the Reaper strain, from which the Reapers came into being. The study was essentially conducted to produce another version of vampires, namely daywalkers, who would have no sense of natural weaknesses to things like garlic and silver, similar to the protagonist Blade's tendencies, who belong to the Damascanos family. But things don't go as planned, and instead of daywalkers, who would be the traditional vampires having similar qualities as the hero, the rogue monstrous Reapers were made. And what's worse is that Reapers can convert other vampires into one of them, which poses the threat of the eradication of an entire race of vampires along with humans. They must be destroyed. How different are Reapers from vampires? Reapers surpassed other vampires in strength, speed, and resilience. They healed quickly, resisted the effects of garlic and silver, and their hearts were protected in a cage of bone. However, these new features to the Reapers came at a cost. They made them voracious and constantly bloodthirsty, driven to replenish their hungry bellies. If they didn't consume food on time, they would begin to decay, so blood was a survival need. Except for Jared Nomak, the Reapers didn't possess basic human intelligence and became feral, posing a major threat to the very existence of both vampires and humans. Who invented the Reapers? Every good invention is made with a good intention, and that's what Eli Damascanos, the ancient vampire elder, had in mind when he thought of making a species that overpowered all the weaknesses of vampires. He worked on sequencing the pureblood DNA of the new breed and used genetic sequencing to create the strain known as the Reaper strain. Carriers of this strain came to be known as Reapers. Unfortunately, the birth of the Reapers didn't yield the same result as he had expected, as they were stronger than the vampires, but possessed an insatiable desire for blood, rendering them feral monsters. Their metabolism was so fast that they needed to suck blood every few hours, making them a ginormous threat. Reapers are like those roadside drug addicts who will do anything for a dose. Kill, steal, beat, just anything. Except for the first Reaper, Jared Nomak. None of the Reapers could speak. They spoke through growls and snarls. They possessed the intelligence to carry out the orders of their leader, Jared, and conducted their attacks in an orderly manner, behaving civilly in public. They spent time setting traps for their enemies and prey. Role of Reapers in the movie Blade 2. Various writers and directors have presented the vampire species according to their understanding and styles, but director Guillermo del Toro's unique take is a combination of his style and vision. His vision is truly original, and his contribution to the Blade franchise was the reason the world got to see a new yet heinous portrayal of vampires that will stand the test of time. The plot. In Prague, Blade, the superhero Vampire, a mix of human and vampire, looks for Abraham Whistler, who was his mentor. Whistler was suspected to be dead after Deacon Frost, the silver-maned enemy of Blade, was attacked by him. As Blade searched for him, he discovered that Whistler had been turned into a vampire and was being held in captivity for 2 years. Upon interrogating Vampire Rush about Whistler's location, Blade rescued Whistler and cured him of his vampirism. Here, Scud, Blade's young and talented new technician, is introduced. Meanwhile, a widespread pandemic breaks out that was responsible for converting the vampire population into reapers, the feral and mutant monsters with an insatiable appetite for blood. Their bite was potent enough to affect both humans and vampires alike. And guess who the main carrier of the pandemic virus of the Reaper strain was? Jared Nomak, the first Reaper to come into being, whose purpose in life was to exterminate the entire vampire and human race. To combat such a massive pandemic, the vampire elder, Eli Damaskinos, sends his loyal aide, Assad, along with his daughter, Nissa, to strike a pact with Blade. Blade was hesitant to team up with the vampires, but since he knew the entire human race was under threat by the Reapers, he allies with them, better known as the Blood Pack. Blood Pack was an elitist group that had been assigned the task of killing Blade earlier. They consisted of Assad, Nissa, Chupa, Reinhardt, Priest Noman, Verlaine, and her lover, Lighthammer. Since foes, Blood Pack and Blade, were uniting to fight the Reapers, initially, there were some skirmishes between Reinhardt and Blade. The latter hitches an explosive onto the back of Reinhardt's skull to keep him in check. As they go about looking to kill the Reapers, they find them lounging at the vampire nightclub, totally confident about their power and strength. Blade realizes their strength when he sees the Reapers are immune to basic weaknesses that vampires have, except for UV exposure. At this point, Nomak tries to recruit Blade to fight for the Reapers' cause, but he turns down the offer and fights him instead. However, since these weapons weren't UV enabled, Nomak escapes. Unbeknownst to the group, Lighthammer gets bitten, but he hides it from the group, while Priest 2 is bitten until he's subjected to euthanasia after exposure to sunlight. After Whistler returns to inform the group about a Reaper's nest behind the sewers, they go and attack them. After this attack, Nissa cuts up a dead Reaper and learns about their hearts, encased in a durable form of bone, which means the Reapers were essentially invincible. So they begin building UV weapons that could emit UV rays. At dawn, Lighthammer enters the Reaper nest, transforms into a Reaper, and kills Snowman. Verlaine exposes both herself and Lighthammer to sunlight, resulting in their deaths. Chupa attacks Whistler following Priest's death. However, Whistler releases Reaper pheromones, attracting a group of Reapers that kill Chupa. Assad and Nissa are ambushed, leading to Assad's death. Blade rescues Nissa and activates a UV bomb, eliminating all Reapers except Nomak. Nissa and Reinhardt avoid the explosion, but Nissa is severely injured until Blade allows her to consume his blood for recovery. Damaskinos' forces rush in and capture Blade, Whistler, and Scud, where the vampire elder admits that Nomak was his son and a product of his invention to create a superior vampire race, but he had failed in his mission. Here, Scud is revealed as a spy sent by the vampires to keep an eye on Blade, but Blade knew about Scud's involvement and kills him with the explosive that was ensconced in the back of Reinhardt's skull. Unhappy with the outcome of his invention, Damaskinos now plans to use Blade's blood to spawn a breed that would be immune to sunlight, thus making the vampires invincible. Blade, who was weakened due to the blood he had given Nissa, was like a sitting duck ready to be taken by Damaskinos, but Whistler rescues Blade and they escape. Reinhardt fires shots at them, but luckily, Blade falls into a blood pool belonging to Damaskinos and drinks it up to regain strength. Blade fights valiantly and kills Reinhardt, but Damaskinos' fate was decided elsewhere when Nomak entered Damaskinos' den to negotiate, not realizing Nissa had sealed the exits. Nissa was annoyed that her father had no regard for his failed son and despised his attitude towards his offspring, so she wanted him dead. And it happened as she wanted. Nomak bites Damaskinos and kills him. He also bites Nissa, infecting her as Blade engages Nomak in a battle. Using tact, Blade stabs Nomak's heart that was encased in the bone cage, leading to Nomak struggling to stay alive, so he grabs Blade's sword and commits suicide. Nissa was dying too, whom Blade carries towards the sunlight as per her desire and watches her dissolve with the first rays of the sunrise. But Blade knew his mission wasn't accomplished until he killed the vampire Rush, who had started this string of battles. He finds him in London and kills him. Del Toro's vision of Blade 2. The making of Blade 2 was largely influenced by director Del Toro's vision, who wanted to wipe off the romantic image vampires had. The entire look and feel of the Reapers was designed to exude monstrosity and horror. The fact that the Reapers felt intense pain when hungry made them desperate and heinous, which increased their terrorizing quotient. The first Blade film was about an ancient vampire elder planning to create a race that would convert the entire human race into the undead, so the stakes were very high for the sequel, Blade 2. But Del Toro pulled off this challenge by introducing the concepts of the Reapers, which were more dangerous and more terrifying than the classic ones. The insatiable hunger that the Reapers possessed posed a high risk of eradicating both humans and vampires, forming the core narrative of Blade 2, which I think was intelligent. I was quite impressed by the plot when I saw the antagonist teaming up with the protagonist to take down a villain who was even worse than the antagonist. That was an interesting twist. Some iconic images float before me in the movie, such as the vampires using a stinger to suck blood, as inspired by Polish folklore. There were also talks about including the vampire Morbius in Blade 2, but the idea was dropped to be used in a future project that would depict Del Toro's vision of additional sequels in the works. Guillermo del Toro has mentioned that the use of anime influenced his style of shooting Blade 2. The vampires in Blade were generally depicted as similar to humans in appearance and mannerisms, with few exceptions. Such as Pearl in the first film, these undead creatures looked human and could interact within the mortal world without attracting attention. Even during feeding, their only noticeable difference was their fangs, which enabled them to blend into ordinary society. In contrast, the Reapers drew inspiration from older depictions of vampires, such as those found in classic works like Nosferatu. Appearance. The Reapers are grayish and bald with a thin frame, and they communicate through growls and snarls. They looked like ghouls from classic folklore. They fought with mindless obsession, driven solely by their hunger and nothing else. They moved about like humans, but were capable of leaping large distances, and once they caught their victim, it was immensely terrifying to watch them suck the blood out of them. A gill-like structure formed from a mutated shoulder blade was seen on their back. Another notable feature was that the Reapers didn't just bite their victims, but split their jaws, wherein the lower jaw split into two, thus revealing a hideous-looking three-part mouth, which would hang onto the victim like a proboscis. The tongue divides into 6 parts at this point, each with small barbed-like teeth, and features 2 pointed inner tongues. The tongue also possesses a bifurcated masseter-type muscle for a stronger bite. Their teeth were like fangs and were poisonous, which could paralyze the prey by injecting a neurotoxin, making the feasting easier. They possessed a long, tube-like tongue that could be shot at a distance to consume blood and transmit the virus strain. Del Toro built the Reaper experience part by part, such that when I watched it in its full glory, Blade 2 became the most terrifying movie I've ever watched, qualifying it as the most remarkable installment of the franchise. Del Toro, known for his work of portraying creatures on screen, such as in Pan's Labyrinth or The Shape of Water, does this with great skill and precision. Del Toro was heard saying he was extremely happy with the outcome of the Reapers on screen, and loved their design, which tied them back to the original vampire story. Abilities and goals. While they were physically stronger than the vampires, their intelligence was at an animalistic level, except for their leader, Nomak. However, one cannot underestimate them when one sees the coordinated manner in which they attack their prey within city sewers. They're like spiders that can climb walls with ease and go past their prey undetected. By the time the victim realized what had happened, it was too late. Although Reapers were immune to all kinds of things that would otherwise harm vampires, such as garlic, silver, and ethylene diamine tetraacetic acid, EDTA blood thinner. Even at their lowest resistance, the Reapers could continue fighting since the Reaper strain had the ability of enhanced regeneration. Their hearts too were encased well enough to be unharmed by any injury unless stabbed with skill. Sunlight was the only way to kill them, which was even more dangerous since a Reaper's body disintegrating in the sun emitted a blue flame as compared to the yellow flame emitted by vampires. The longevity of their lives was also dependent on how much they ate and drank to satiate their hunger. A starving Reaper would begin to feed on itself, displaying a terrifying visual. Marvelous verdict. I am in complete agreement with Guillermo del Toro's vision of breaking the romantic image of the vampires, because until I saw the Blade series, My mind was stuck with the romanticism of the sexy Count Dracula and the mushy Twilight series. Even Del Toro's own work, The Shape of Water, which was about a monster's love for a mute employee in the science lab, held my belief that monsters aren't that bad. Del Toro's mission to break the romanticism of monsters and vampires in a way was a challenge to himself, is what I think. Reapers feel like an alter ego of the vampires, who were out to eradicate all humans and vampires, almost representing the extreme negative side of the vampires. Del Toro captured this aspect so well that it felt like old wine in a new bottle. The concept of the Reapers resembled the zombies, but was presented more terrifyingly. Unlike the zombie stories, the Reapers didn't seem completely mindless because they were part of a larger storyline. The movie delivers everything. It's thrilling, terrifying, and horrific, so I loved the portrayal. I'm looking forward to the next installment, provided Del Toro returns as the captain of the ship. Until next time, and if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe, and thanks everyone.